Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're actually looking at a hidden ticking time bomb that millions of UK trademarks are sitting on right now.
Yeah, it's a completely unprecedented legal cliff. And, it actually just expired a few months ago in January 2026.
Which means that brand name you think you securely own,
hmm
or like that logo you've had in your back pocket for a few years, your competitors might actually be legally allowed to strip it away from you today.
Exactly. I mean, holding a registration certificate suddenly just isn't enough to protect you anymore.
Right. So our mission for today's deep dive is to explore this really high stakes, surprisingly cutthroat world of UK trademarks. We've gone through a huge stack of sources for you.
Yeah, we're pulling from official legal guidelines, UK Intellectual Property Office handbooks, and some really fascinating case law summaries.
Yeah, to pull out the most vital intelligence. Because whether you are an entrepreneur fiercely guarding a brand portfolio or, a challenger trying to clear a path in a crowded market, this matters to you.
It absolutely does.
We are going to unpack the absolute legal necessity
Yeah.
of one very specific concept, which is called genuine use. Because theoretically, a trademark can last forever, right? I mean, the UK's first trademark, Bass Pale Ale, that was registered in 1876, and it's still in force today.
Yeah, it's incredible. But the only reason it's still active is because they actually renew it, and crucially, they use it.
Right. So to wrap our heads around how you can lose a trademark, we first need to look at the law that acts as this, ticking clock on every single registered brand.
Right, so let's start there. It's officially known as Section 46 of the Trademarks Act 1994.
Okay, Section 46. What does it actually do?
Well, under this law, a trademark registration can be completely revoked if it hasn't been put to genuine use in the UK for a continuous period of 5 years following its registration.
Okay, 5 years.
Yeah, or if the owner starts using it but then suspends that use for an uninterrupted 5-year period later on.
Okay, let me unpack this. It sounds a lot like holding a premium gym membership but never actually swiping your card to go inside.
That's a great way to think about it, actually.
Right, because eventually the gym is going to say, hey, we need active members. We're giving your locker to someone else. But who is actually checking this 5-year clock? Is there a trademark police force roaming the supermarket aisles?
You'd think so, but no. The UK Intellectual Property Office, the UKIPO, they don't proactively police non-use at all.
Wait, really? They just let it sit there?
They do. They rely entirely on third parties to file a revocation action. So what's fascinating here is that the whole system is basically designed to prevent companies from hoarding trademarks and, creating unfair monopolies.
Okay, that makes sense. It forces the registry to accurately reflect what's actually active in the UK market.
Exactly. Use it or lose it.
Right. But the law specifically demands genuine use. And looking at the sources, that phrase seems like a massive legal gray area. What exactly qualifies as genuine?
Well, the case law gives us a pretty strict definition, mostly coming from a famous case called the Ansul case.
Okay, the Ansul case.
Yeah, and it establishes that genuine use absolutely cannot be like token use. You can't just print a single brochure purely to preserve your registration. It has to be a real commercial exploitation.
So acting in accordance with its, what did the source call it? It's commercial raison d'etre.
Yes, it's a reason for being. You have to be trying to create or preserve a market for those specific goods or services.
So wait, so what does this mean for a niche business? Say I sell something incredibly rare and expensive, like bespoke industrial robotics. What if I only sell 2 items in an entire 5-year window? Is that enough? Or is there some kind of minimum quota?
That's the beauty of it. There's absolutely no de minimis rule. There is no minimum quota. The scale of use is judged entirely on the market you're in.
Oh, interesting. So context matters.
Hugely. The classic legal example they use is ships versus beans.
Okay, ships versus beans. Let's hear it.
So if you sell 10 beans and you only sell 3 cans to a corner shop over 5 years.
That's definitely token use.
Right. Nobody sells just 3 cans of beans if they're a real business. But if you manufacture commercial ships, selling 3 massive vessels over 5 years is totally legitimate, genuine use.
Wow. Okay, that makes total sense. What about internal use? What if I just use the branded stuff inside my own company office?
Nope, internal use does not count. It has to be outward-facing commercial use. Though there is a cool exception. If you affix the mark to goods in the UK strictly to export them, that actually does count as use in the UK.
Oh, that's huge for manufacturers. But speaking of things that don't count, I love the Mick Jagger example from the case law summaries.
Oh, yeah, that one is brilliant.
It's crazy because it shows that even celebrity reputation doesn't bypass these rules. The EUIPO basically held that the proprietor of the Makes Jagger mark still had to prove actual commercial use of the goods.
Right, because fame alone isn't use. You could be the most famous person on earth, but if you haven't sold a branded t-shirt in 5 years, your clothing trademark is vulnerable.
That is wild. Now, what if I changed my logo slightly? Say I started with a black and white mark, and then 2 years later I make it color. Do I lose my original mark because I'm using a variant form?
Not necessarily. Using a mark in a slightly different form, like changing upper to lowercase, it still counts, as long as it doesn't alter the distinctive character of the registered mark.
Okay, so a minor facelift is fine.
Exactly.
So if a mark fails this genuine use test, how is it actually attacked? And how is that different from a mark that, say, shouldn't have been registered in the first place?
Okay, so this is where we have to distinguish between two completely different legal attacks: revocation and invalidation.
Right, let's break those down.
So revocation, which uses form TM26N, is what happens when a mark was totally valid when it was registered, but something happened after the fact.
Like the 5 years of non-use we just talked about.
Exactly. Or maybe it became a generic term, or the owner started using it in a way that misleads the public.
Okay, and invalidation.
Invalidation uses form TM26I, and that means the mark breached absolute or relative grounds during the application. Basically, it should never have been registered to begin with.
Like if it was purely descriptive or someone filed it in bad faith?
Exactly. And, by the way, both of these forms cost £250 to file.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Now, there was a concept under revocation in the AIPPI document that I found fascinating. Partial revocation. The whole socks, shoes, and t-shirts rule.
Yes, partial revocation is super common.
So if I register a mark for socks, shoes, and t-shirts, but for 5 years I only ever sell socks and shoes.
Then a competitor can apply to partially revoke your mark just for the t-shirts. You literally lose what you don't use.
You only get to keep the monopoly for the exact goods you trade in. But here's where it gets really interesting to me. What if the non-use isn't my fault?
What do you mean?
Well, what if I'm blocked by a government trade embargo? Or like I'm stuck in a 10-year pharmaceutical regulatory approval process. I literally can't sell my product.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the law, Section 46 does allow for proper reasons for non-use.
Okay, so there is a safety valve.
There is, but they have to be factors completely outside the proprietor's control. So the trade embargo or the pharma approvals you mentioned, those would likely count.
But what if my product just flopped? Like standard commercial failure. No one wanted to buy my energy drink.
Yeah, no. A simple lack of consumer demand or running out of funding, that will never qualify as a proper reason. The registry doesn't insure you against a bad business model.
Wow. It is unforgiving. And, while these rules have been around since 1994, a massive geopolitical shift just triggered a ticking time bomb for millions of marks in the UK right now.
Yes, we have to talk about the 2026 Brexit evidence cliff.
Let's set the context for you listening. Following Brexit, EU trademarks, or EUTMs, they basically no longer had effect in the UK. So on January 1st, 2021, the UK automatically created clone marks.
Right, you can spot them because they have prefixes like UK08 or UK009. They did this so brand owners wouldn't just lose protection overnight.
Exactly. But they also built in a grace period, didn't they?
They did. For the first 5 years after Brexit, brand owners could rely on their prior use of the mark anywhere in the EU to defend these UK clone marks against non-use challenges.
Meaning, if I only ever sold my product in France and Germany, I could use those sales to defend my UK clone mark.
Exactly. It was a massive safety net.
But look at the calendar. Today is April 25th, 2026. The 5-year grace period from January 1, 2021. It expired just months ago in January 2026.
It did. And this raises a massive, terrifying question for brand managers everywhere. The evidence cliff has officially been reached.
So use in the EU no longer supports a UK registration.
Not anymore. If you hold one of these comparable clone marks, you must now be able to prove genuine commercial use specifically within the UK market over the last 5 years.
And if you can't,
then your mark is highly, highly vulnerable to a non-use cancellation action. The safety net is completely gone.
that is wild. Knowing that your mark is suddenly that vulnerable or, spotting a competitor's vulnerable mark and wanting to take it, that leads us to the final battleground. The paperwork and the actual proof.
Right, because defending a mark is not a casual process.
So say someone files a TM26N form to revoke my mark. What happens?
The burden of proof immediately shifts to you, the trademark owner. You have to file a TM8N form, which is a notice of defense. And I cannot stress this enough. It is not enough to just say you used it.
Honestly, it sounds like an IRS tax audit.
Yeah.
You can't just hand them a business card with your logo and a hyperlink to your website and say, look, we exist, right?
Exactly. The sources are so incredibly explicit about this. Providing links to online content or just listing website addresses is not a valid form of evidence. The tribunal will not click your links.
Because the internet changes, right?
Yeah.
A link today doesn't prove what was there 3 years ago.
Precisely. So you need a clear, unbroken chain of physical documentation.
Like what? What are the actual evidentiary requirements?
You need dated sales invoices. And crucially, those invoices have to actually show the trademark. If your invoice just says stock code 42, it's useless. It needs to say the brand name.
So tying the transaction directly to the mark, what else?
Documented marketing spend, turnover figures specific to the UK, analytics showing website views from UKIP addresses, and actual physical examples of the mark on packaging.
Oh, wow. So you basically need a historical archive of proof.
You really do, and independent evidence is key. An affidavit from your own company director holds way less weight than data from an independent distributor. The tribunal knows your employees are biased.
Right. Oh, and the sources mentioned using the Wayback Machine Internet Archive.
Yes, that is a fantastic strategy. Since live links aren't accepted, you can use the Wayback Machine to get time-stamped historical screenshots of your e-commerce site from 2023 or 2024 to prove the goods were consistently offered to UK consumers.
That's incredibly smart. Now, let's flip it. Say you are the challenger and you want to attack a dormant mark. There was a piece of strategic advice in the guidelines about approaching the owner first.
Yes, this is a massive procedural trap. The guidance strongly advises that you always approach the trademark owner before you file the £250 revocation application.
But why? Why wouldn't I just ambush them with a legal filing to catch them off guard?
Because of the costs. If you file without warning them, and they immediately receive it and say, you know what, we aren't using it, we surrender the mark, you technically win. The mark is gone, but you will not be awarded your costs.
Because you forced a formal legal procedure when a stern email might have worked?
Exactly. The UKIPO wants you to resolve these commercially. If you warn them, they refuse, and then you win the formal case, the tribunal is much more likely to make them pay a portion of your legal fees.
That is such a crucial tip. And it really highlights why the sources continually emphasize the role of the professional in all of this.
Absolutely. Navigating these evidentiary standards, utilizing things like the Madrid Protocol for international filings, and managing these incredibly strict, non-extendable deadlines.
Because if you miss a deadline, there's no grace period.
None. You lose the mark automatically. That makes hiring an intellectual property solicitor or a trademark attorney a commercial necessity, not just a luxury. The stakes are just too high, especially with the Brexit cliff.
Okay, let's take a breath and recap the journey we've been on for you today. We started by exploring the ticking clock of Section 46 and the 5-year non-use rule.
Right.
We defined what genuine use really looks like. Remember, the ships versus the beans.
Yeah.
It has to be real commercial exploitation, not just a token gesture.
And we navigated the incredibly harsh reality of the 2026 Brexit evidence cliff. Those European sales just don't protect your UK clone marks anymore.
Exactly. And finally, we unpacked the rigorous, basically audit-level evidence required to defend your brand and the strategic cost traps challengers need to avoid.
It's a lot to take in, but the main takeaway is that a trademark isn't a static certificate that you just frame on a wall. It is a dynamic asset that requires active, documented commercial use to survive.
Couldn't agree more. And to wrap up, I want to leave you with a final, somewhat provocative thought to mull over. Something that builds on all this physical evidence we've been talking about.
Oh, I like where this is going.
So, we've hammered home that to defend a UK mark, genuine use has to occur strictly within the physical borders of the UK. But as we move further into a fully globalized digital economy, where digital goods, services, and the metaverse completely blur the lines of physical location, how is the law going to adapt to proving genuine use strictly within those borders?
That is the frontier right there.
Right. I mean, think about it. If your company is in Tokyo and your servers are in California, but you sell a virtual branded t-shirt to a digital avatar operated by someone sitting in a bedroom in London, does that keep your physical UK trademark alive?
It's a brilliant question. How do you prove geography in a borderless medium?
Exactly. It's a question for the absolute next era of IP law. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the information around you, and we'll catch you next time.